Good evening, everybody. Want to welcome you. I'm Terry Gilman from Creating Conversations. We are delighted that you are joining us tonight. We are privileged and honored to have two wonderful authors for you in conversation. This program is brought to you in partnership between Creating Conversations, which is a bookstore and events business in Redondo Beach, and the Mission Viejo Library. We do thank you for your support of both organizations tonight and encourage you to support the authors with your book purchases through Creating Conversations. Okay, so without any further ado, I would like to introduce Sarah Stimson, who will introduce David Kessler.
Hello, good evening. Thank you so much, Terry, for that introduction. I'm Sarah Stimson from Mission Viejo Library, and we are thrilled to be hosting this event with our longtime partners, Creating Conversations. And just a few quick things that I wanted to say before we dive right in, as you're all getting comfortable and seated and your technology set up just the way you would like it. The Mission Viejo Library is offering curbside service right now, so if you haven't yet taken advantage of that, please do so. My big announcement for the library is that we are reopening for in-person appointments on October 6th. So you can find all the information about that online on our website and of course through our social media. And we are doing programs like the wonderful program that you're going to be a part of this evening. One thing that you can do to support our library during this time is to help spread the word. We have author events, we do virtual book clubs, we have story times, all kinds of programming. And everything that you do to share with your circle of family and friends helps us to be able to demonstrate that our community wants programs like this and ensures that we'll be able to continue offering you very high quality author visits like what you're gonna see tonight. And so with that, I am going to introduce our moderator this evening. It is my pleasure to introduce David Kessler. He is the world's foremost expert on grieving and healing after loss. He is the author of 6 books, including the best-selling book, Finding Meaning, The Sixth Stage of Grief. And he's also co-authored 2 books with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. David's personal experience as a child witnessing a mass shooting while visiting his mother who was dying in the hospital inspired him to begin his journey. For most of his life, David has taught about the end of life, trauma, and grief. However, despite his vast knowledge in this field, his life was turned upside down by the sudden death of his 21-year-old son. In 2020, David's wisdom has gone viral. His interview with Brené Brown is the world's #1 podcast. The audio of Finding Meaning has been submitted by Simon & Schuster for consideration as Best Spoken Word Grammy. And he is the founder of grief.com. And I can think of no better person to lead us in this discussion this evening with Dr. Eger. Thank you so much, David, for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I so appreciate it. And I want to thank the Mission Viejo Library and Creating Conversations for putting this together, because it's an extraordinary event with an extraordinary person we're going to be talking to. And I am just so honored to speak to this amazing person who wrote this wonderful new book called The Gift. And at the end tonight, I'm going to talk to you about how you can get this book signed, which is something I'm hoping for. And I think it's really an amazing gift. And there's no surprise that it's called The Gift. So let me tell you about our guest tonight, Dr. Edith Eger. So first of all, I think about today is not about discussing just surviving a concentration camp, and that is the biggest feat you could ever imagine. But for her, it's more than that. It's about how all of us can survive and thrive from our own traumas, our own losses, all those dark places that we all live. Today is really about finding peace and happiness no matter what. And despite overwhelming odds, Dr. Edith Eger survived the Holocaust and immigrated with her husband and young daughter to America, where she raised a family and earned a PhD and practiced psychology. She spent decades hiding from her past, struggling with flashbacks and survivor's guilt. And 35 years after World War II ended, Edith returned to Auschwitz and was finally able to heal and forgive herself. Today, she maintains a busy clinical practice and helps others heal. At the age of 16, she was sent to Auschwitz. Hours after her parents killed, she was forced to dance for Dr. Mengele's amusement, just to survive there. Edie was pulled from a pile of corpses when American troops liberating the camps in 1945. It's hard to believe that this happened in our existence, and yet it did, and we have to come to terms with that. And it happened to this extraordinary woman who is here to tell us about it. So it is my privilege to be talking in this conversation with Dr. Edie. Dr. Edie, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for that beautiful introduction. I really am so honored that I can have a dialogue with you and see how we can exchange philosophies. I know that having a 21-year-old child and to experience what you had and able to turn all the tragedy into an opportunity for you to guide others, not just to be survivors, but to be able to look at everything in life and look at it as an opportunity for growth. So I'm ready to answer any questions, and I'm ready to be useful. I usually ask my patients, how can I be useful to you, rather than how can I help you? So I like to be useful to you. And we're talking about grief, and that's what life is all about, that we're grieving and feeling and healing.
And I'll tell you, reading this book, The Gift, it is truly, it is about grief, it is about trauma, it is about hardships, but it is about finding a happy life. And I think the other day you and I were talking, and I was in tears talking with you about my son. And do you remember what you said about that loss of my son, that wound, what you called it?
I remember to told you that it's usually not what's happening, but the way we view it. And I know that you have a very special place in your heart for that son that was sent to you for 21 years. And that moment that you picked up that little baby and bonded with that precious little son of yours, that you never ever forget, and you don't even overcome, but you can come to terms with it. I call mine a special cherished.
That's what you said to me the other day. You called it my cherished wound.
Yes, I am saying what I lived, and you say what you lived.
Right.
So that's why we can be useful to others, because they're going through perhaps an experience, and knowing that we don't try to overcome, but to come to terms with it.
Right.
And so here we are.
Right.
We are both guides. We are guides. And thank you for working with my hero, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who told us that death and dying is about life and living.
And we are going to talk about trauma, loss, healing tonight. But we have to, just for those few that maybe don't know it, could you tell us a bit about your story and your experience?
Sometimes I tell people I have a story, but I'm not my story. I was born into a very, very talented family. I had two sisters. Magda played the piano. Clara was a child prodigy in violin. She played the Mendelssohn violin concerto. She was the only Jewish girl accepted at the music conservatory in Budapest. And her Christian professor smuggled her out from the camp in Budapest and hid her until the end of the war. I think it's very important. When I was asked by Larry King, were there any kind people among the guards? And I do talk about the time when my sister Magda told me that if I don't get some food, she's going to die. And I was told that if we dare to leave the premises, we're going to be shot right away. So I was risking, and I saw some carrots in the next garden. And I was a gymnast. I was still able to somehow jump and came up the wall, and I met the guy with a gun. Remember, I was told that we're going to be shot if we dare. But of course, I wanted to do anything I could for my sister. And I remember that clicking, and I began to pray, not for me, but for the God. And there was an eye contact. I pay a great deal of attention to the eye contact, because I can kill you with my eyes. I could love you with my eyes. And we had that eye contact, and he turned the gun around and pushed me inside. This is April 1945. Okay. And in a little village in Austria, and I just didn't know whether I'm going to be killed any minute. So in the middle of my praying, he turned the gun around and pushed me inside. The following morning he came, wanted to know who dared to break the rules, and I crawled to him and I told him it was me. Remember, the German people are starving as well. And he gave me a little loaf of bread and said, you must have been very hungry to do what you did. I wish I could meet this man today. You see, I found the diamond even in that garbage pile. I wish I could meet that kind man. So that's what I told Larry King. Yes, I did meet a kind man. So there is a gift in everything.
And I think that's such a powerful archetype you mentioned there, that so many times I hear people say, there was all bad, it was all dark. And I think psychologically, you spotting a little light in the darkness helps us.
Yes, I think these are very difficult times, because there are two things going on which I experienced. We were told one thing and we found another. And we were not prepared for what was to come. And this is what's happening today. So I hope I can be useful to acknowledge that my ballet, wonderful man told me, the ballet instructor, that God built us in such a magnificent way that we can have ecstasy in life from out, and not to wait for someone to make you happy. And I think this is the time when I'm hoping that people will take really stock of their lives, especially for couples, that they can really tell each other what they appreciate and what they don't, and they can really not going back, but to have a new beginning. And this is, I'm hoping that you and I can give an opportunity, as Auschwitz was for me, to discover my inner resources.
And I would just like to read something from your new book, The Gift, if I may,
Thank you.
that you say that, you know, we think of your story and it's so easy to think whatever we've been through isn't Auschwitz. But here's something you write that I think is so important. You say, although our lives have probably been very different, you know what I mean, many of us experience feeling trapped in our minds. Our thoughts and beliefs determine and often limit how we feel, what we do, and what we think is possible. In my work, I've discovered that while the imprisoning beliefs show up and play out in unique ways, there are some common mental prisons that contribute to suffering. This book is a practical guide to help us identify our mental prisons and develop the tools we need to become free. I was so struck by the story that I've often heard that a patient of yours said, she said that she had been sexually abused. And she said, I feel horrible even saying that to you when you've had such a worse time in the concentration camps. Do you remember your response?
I sure remember, because I told her that she was even more in prison than I was, because I knew the enemy. I was told every day I'm never going to get out of here alive. And that's why I became a diplomat in sexology way back when I was studying with Albert Ellis, who actually created the society that we were able to be guides for people, especially girls who didn't have a childhood and they kept their secrets, and then the secret would have you. So I think it's very important that you mentioned that we don't compare who suffered more, but while you're suffering, you develop strength, you become stronger, and nothing is going to be without suffering in life. It's part of life. It's just what you do with it. And what you do with it, you turn it into an opportunity that you don't wait for somebody to make you happy, that you are okay with yourself, because self-love is self-care. It's not narcissistic. So I hope you get up in the morning and you love yourself.
I think in our modern society, somehow self-care has become selfish. And so many people become other-oriented.
Yeah. But you cannot give what you don't have. So I think it's very wonderful what Mother Teresa said, that God only gave us things what we can handle. And then she looked up and she says, God, why do you love me so much? And that is really adorable, that some of us have more experiences in looking at life as a way to really develop how we can be survivors and never a victim of any circumstance.
Well, let's talk about that, because the idea of being a victim, I'm always very clear. And you know, once in a while, someone will tell me that a little bit of my work reminds them of your work. And I'm like, if there's a small part of my work that reminds people of you, I am just honored and overjoyed. And you really have come out so strongly and help explain that there is a victim and there is a perpetrator, but there can also be a victim in our mind. And that's how we imprison ourselves. Can you talk a little bit about that victimhood that we live with in our mind?
Thank you very much. Some people look at victim as being weak, and the victimizer as being strong. So part of the psyche will identify with the aggressor. That's we call the Stockholm syndrome. And yesterday's victims can easily become today's victimizers. There is no victim without a victimizer. And there are benefits in it because while I'm a victim, I am entitled to do nothing. So there are the secondary gains that we want to hopefully look at. Any behavior satisfies a need. And the victims will find the victimizer all the time. The victim's mentality is very rigid, is black and white, all or nothing. Survivors are flexible. They don't ask why me, they say what now? I remember when my husband was put in jail by the communists, what now? So what I did right away, because I'm a survivor, I didn't have time to feel sorry for myself. I got my big diamond ring. I went to the jail. I gave it to the prison guard. We fled overnight, and we came to Vienna and to America penniless. So victims are also blaming. And while you blame, you're still a child. And in the English language, when people are angry, I tell that in school that the bully is going to start a sentence with the word you. You are this, you are stupid, you. And you say to yourself, the longer they talk, we still have free speech in America. The longer they talk, the more relaxed I become. You take the negative stimuli. I was told every day, I'm never gonna get out of that alive. The only way I will get out of that as a corpse. And look at me. I said to myself, are you kidding? Even when they took my blood many, many times, they told me they take my blood to aid the German soldiers so they can win the war and take over the world. And I said to myself, you're such a stupid idiot, that I had some humor. It was more philosophical humor, not sarcasm or cynicism. So again, the victim's mentality is blaming, problem-oriented rather than solution-oriented. And many victims live in the past.
Right. And, you know, that's the part that I think people sometimes will say to me, and I'll talk about your work, they'll go, don't you understand, I was a victim. And there's such a distinction, and you actually demonstrated it beautifully at the beginning of this. When I said, would you tell us your story? You said, yes, but I am not my story. That we are not still the victim, even though we may have been.
Yeah, I am. It's not my identity, what was done to you. And that's why when I work with sexual abuse, I'm hoping to be the midwife that you don't give anybody another inch and try to live a full life. And so for that is recognizing that the victims are unforgiving and survivors forgive themselves, which is the hardest thing to do, which I started to do when I returned to Auschwitz. I was working with 2 Vietnam veterans, and one of them was blaming, and the other one told me that he had a second chance in life. And I began to feel like an imposter because I had a white coat, and it said Dr. Eger, Department of Psychology, and I could not take them further than I have gone myself. So I really felt like an imposter, and I needed to go back to Auschwitz, go back to that lion.
Because you didn't want to go at first, right? You didn't want to go at first.
My sister told me I'm an idiot. Yeah.
And I think we all, in our healing, have to go back to our past. And sometimes we think we must put the past out of our mind, but it does need that revisiting for healing, does it not?
I think it's very important to assign the shame and guilt to the perpetrator and begin to forgive yourself. But there is no forgiveness without rage. My daughter calls it Edithism, so I give you a couple of those, that the opposite of depression is expression. What comes out of your body doesn't make you ill, what stays in there does. So we either vent anger, we suppress anger. I like people to learn to dissolve the anger. Anger is not a dirty word, it's what you do with it, it's how you channel it and how you decide to hold on to it. And also, victims can be very punitive, and survivors are capable of giving up the need for revenge. So, you know, if you switch gears in a car, you got to release the clutch. You know, what are you holding on to and what are you willing to let go of? That's very, very important.
Why do you think in trauma and in grief, our mind turns on us sometimes and blames us? Is it about finding control?
I think it's about control and power. How much do we need and how much are we willing to let go of? Yes, I think it's very important for me to be in charge of my thinking, because what I think, I create.
And I don't
It's
think
very
we know that. I think sometimes, you know, when I talk to people about their thinking, they will say, I can't change my thinking. And I will say, I don't want you to be a victim of your thinking either, that you have power to change it. Would you agree that we need for people to understand they, you know, like so many times when someone has gone through something horrific and they tell me the images are coming, I will tell them how in trauma, of course, the images are going to come up. But in time, you will learn you don't have to stay with them. You have some control.
Exactly. When I arrived in Gunskirchen, Austria, after I survived the death march, cannibalism broke out. I like you to see the sound of music. And when cannibalism broke out, I looked up at God and told God to help me, guide me. And God told me to look down. And I still had grass to eat. And I picked one blade of grass over against the other. So I can't is not in my vocabulary. I can. Why? Because I think I can. Yes, I am. Yes, I can. Yes, I will. So I can't means I'm helpless. That's a lie. That's a lie. Not to give in that hopelessness and helplessness. You know, those are the cognitive elements of depression, feeling helpless, hopeless, and worthless.
Well,
and
we both know of the work of Martin Seligman and the whole concept of learned helplessness. And how
learned helplessness was very important, because when I was liberated, I saw people, I was very young, I saw people going through the gate, and in no time at all, they would come back and sit down. Seligman is absolutely brilliantly talk about the learned helplessness and just sat down. We were free, but freedom, you got to read Erich Fromm, you know, about the freedom. That freedom requires responsibility. If you ask a child, why do you do that? And they say, because I feel like it. They don't care about the consequence. But as an adult, I still have temptation. God gave us temptation so we can practice the freedom of choice. I can still pick which grass I was going to eat. I can't means I'm helpless, and that's not true. That's a lie.
And your wording, because of your experiences, are so powerful. How many of us are still hostages and prisoners of our past? You know, you so clearly were liberated. And so many times, so many people out there work with people who are still stuck in their own prison of their mind. One of the things is guilt. Can you talk a moment about guilt? Because after trauma, after grief, after hardships, we often have guilt.
Guilt is in the past. There is one thing I cannot change, is the past. But if you can recognize that at the time you did what was really possible for you, you accept your limitations and begin to acknowledge and say to yourself that if I knew then what I know now, if my parents knew then they had tickets to come to America, they would have been able to do that. But we didn't know what was happening next. So don't blame yourself, because with our limited capacity, we did what we could. Parents do the best they can for their children, but many times they leave their own pain to the children, and we need to give it back to them where it belongs. Right. We need to really ask ourselves when someone talks to us, whose problem is that? And not to really take over, but to give it back where it belongs. And that's where, you know, I'm not helping people, but I'm useful to look at what happened. And no matter what, you still made it, because it's easier to die than to live. Look at your birth certificate. It doesn't say life is easy. I'm sure Elizabeth told you about the bunny story. Would you like to tell about the bunny story? Or shall I tell?
Please, you do.
Okay, what happened that in a conference, a friend asked, they talked about grief and asked Elizabeth to talk about the bunny. And she said, oh, please, I'm 50-some years old, don't talk to me about the bunny. But she insisted, and this is what she said. When I was a young girl in Germany, and you know, you never argue with your parents. You do exactly what you are told. And my father came to me and said, we're gonna take the bunny to the butcher. And I told the bunny to go away and run away, but the bunny didn't run away because the bunny loved me. But my father came and I took the bunny and we went to the butcher, and the butcher went back and came out and said, it's too bad that you didn't wait 2 more days, because you would have had 2 more bunnies. And she began to cry. I mean, from the belly, that unconditional, that grief, it doesn't go away. We don't overcome, but we don't allow ourselves to create the prison in our own mind, because the key is in our pocket.
And it was interesting. She talked so clearly about wanting the bunny to run away because it was her pet. And she said when the bunny wouldn't run away, she realized that the object of her affection loved her back. And to have to be part of ending its life was brutal for her. And all those years later, those tears were still there.
Yes, I am too. I cry a great deal. I am wearing a butterfly. I have 2 butterfly chairs, because I look at life as a metamorphosis, and you have to shed the chrysalis. And the butterfly doesn't fly right away, they rehearse. So it's very important to have a goal and then see what you're focusing on. Anything you focus on is going to really reinforce the very behavior that you really don't want anymore. So think about your thinking and pay attention what you're paying attention to. Any behavior you pay attention, you reinforce that behavior.
I love that line of yours in the book. Pay attention to what you're paying attention to. Because
Yes.
so many times when we say, I'm never going to get over this, I'm never going to get better, if we repeat that 100 times a day, it's going to be harder.
You may come through what you feel. Get rid of never and always. Those are dead-end words. Those are absolutistic words. Just say, up till now I did this, and now I can do something else. Whatever you practice, you become better at it. And that's why it's very important to acknowledge that we are planted here and we want to hopefully blossom and water that plant because we want to hopefully die happy, knowing that we gave to the world with our very limited capacity. If we accept the boundaries, we accept the limits rather than denying the limits and boundaries. And that's the difference between a victim's mentality and a survivor's mentality.
The other thing, when I was reading the book, that I've read a lot about grief, obviously, and you said something I had never heard it put this way. You said in relationships, because like I said, we think so much about we think about, grief as only a death, but there's many kinds of losses in life. I think we're all experiencing it now, but you said, and I thought this was remarkable, when people are talking about rejection, they've been rejected in a relationship, they're talking about grief.
Exactly. And it has to do with my expectation. So if I come to you after this and I would tell you, I really want to get to know you. I hope you want to get to know me too. And you told me, I respect you, but to tell you the truth, I'm really not interested. So I wanted something and I didn't get it. Now, which God said that you should get what you want, when you want it, how you want it, you see? But you didn't reject me because the only one can reject me is me. I just wanted something and I'm disappointed. I also have the freedom to never get discouraged and find the wonderful English word called next. There is always the curiosity next. And that's why that helped me to survive in Auschwitz. I wanted to know what's going to happen next. That tomorrow I'll be free. I'm going to see my boyfriend who told me I have beautiful hands and beautiful eyes. And so you find hope in hopelessness and never ever give up that this is temporary and I can survive it.
Yeah,
Everything is temporary.
I often say that expectations are just resentments under construction, that we're going to,
Oh, yeah. I love that.
we're going to resent it later. One of the other things that you say that is so powerful is for us to think about our thinking and our experience and ask, is it empowering or is it depleting?
Yes. Anything you do, you ask yourself, when you are with someone, is that person empowering me or depleting me? Am I stronger with that person than without that person? Constantly pay attention to your self-dialogue. It can change your whole body chemistry. And that is science. And that is wonderful. That the way you talk to yourself in the morning can make or break your whole day. So today we're getting rid of guilt and we're getting rid of worry. Mothers worry all the time. What if this happens? What if that happens? I think 78% of what we worry about never happens.
Yeah, you know, after working in hospitals for years, I would see
Yes.
horrible things happen to children, and I worried about my kids all the time. And when my son actually died, wasn't a moment I was worrying. And I think about all those years that worrying robbed me of life that I could have been having with him.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was then, and I'm sure
This
your
is now.
son wants you to have a good life because you are a good person and you guide people never to lock themselves in their own concentration camps. So I think your son needs you now. And if you go and take off your shoes and make contact with your son, is he buried?
Yes,
Near, yeah.
yes.
I did that actually with someone in Europe because the son came to me that the mother was very depressed and had all the psychiatric medication, and she doesn't want to play with the grandchildren. And this is what I did. I talked to her. I only had 1 hour, I want you to know. So I asked her, where is the mother buried? And it was with an accent. And so I began to talk to her with that accent. And I told her that your mother needs you right now. So this is called reframing. And she looked at me, what is that all about? And I told her, you know, Jewish mothers especially want to be sure that they didn't leave a cripple here. So I want you to go to that cemetery, take your shoes off, and make contact with your mother so she can rest in peace. And I got letters from the children that the mom is back and a good grandma now. So it is something, I call it the Hungarian exorcism, because I didn't know what to say or what to do. But, you know, people are sent to me and things just come. And that worked. Wonderful that you don't run away. Don't run away. When my husband died, I talked to someone, a medium, and pretty soon he was talking to my husband and he was laughing, and I'm sitting there because he cost me $100, and I'm thinking, what am I doing with this guy? He's laughing away, but then he said, you know what? If your husband would know that you pay to a person like me, he would be very angry. And I said, I know now. My husband was a CPA, and if he knew that I pay money to this guy, then I knew, oh, yes, now I know that. And, you know, because he asked me, how often do I see my husband? And I said, every day. And he said to me, he's not there. He's here in your heart. You don't have to go to the cemetery every day. So I think it was very useful for me to know that I don't have to go to the cemetery every day.
And I feel like I have learned that too also, that my son is in my heart and in my soul. Would you be up for taking a few questions from folks?
Of course.
All right. So while people are getting their questions ready and putting their in, I just want to release a little shame and share something. Years ago, I used to go to my local bookstore. I'm saying this out loud to release the shame. I used to go to my local bookstore and I would take a picture of a book and I would go buy the book online. And guess what happened to my local bookstore? It disappeared. And that was on me. And I have to take responsibility for that. So I have learned, while there's an amazing convenience with everything online, please, please think about your local bookstores. And the bookstore that is putting this on is Creating Conversations. And Dr. Edie, your book is out of stock, but if people actually call them, they can get a signed copy and they have them. So, and they also have mine. So I just want to let people know, if you are thinking of either of these books, and especially this one, The Gift, which is amazing, please, please go to Creative Conversations and support them for bringing something like this into our homes.
Thank you.
And please support all our local independent bookstores, because I don't want to live in a world where they've disappeared, and it's up to us. And the indie bookstores need us more than ever. So that information will be put up there for you to get it. My book just came out in paperback. Hers is in hardcover. And the choice, they also have Your First Wonderful Book. So they're all there. All right. Yes, I'm comfortable with the Q&A. Go ahead and ask questions if you want. I guess they'll just put them in the chat and I will see them. Is that how we'll do this? This is sort of our new world, so we'll get them however we get them. I see, will you be able to post the gift in New Zealand? I'm sure that they can give you insights, and I don't know if the gift is out in New Zealand yet, but I bet it will be. Laura says, you have lived through the darkest and most difficult times in modern history. Many young people today feel hopeless and distraught as we're experiencing dark times. What words of advice would you give us? You know, that's such an important question, Dr. Edie, that you lived and saw the hate. And I think many of us are beginning to see the hate again in our modern world. What would you say to young people about that?
I would ask young people not to say yes, but yes, and. Yes, and I'm here. Yes, and I can make a difference. Because I was very suicidal when I was liberated, because they put me in a cast and I could hardly breathe. I had 5 kinds of typhoid fever, and my lung was filled with water. So I realized every day that my parents are not coming back. And the reality hit me, and I became very suicidal. But I know my loving God told me that if I die, I'm not going to be able to be for something. And I remembered to somehow realize that maybe there is another way. Yes, because people who are suicidal, I'm going to be very simple, that they either have something what they don't want, or they want something what they don't have. Do you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
Very simple thing. Yep. The older I get, I less pathologize. I don't pathologize, I demythologize. There is no perfect family, there is no perfect anything. To give up your perfectionism, you give up your need also to please other people. It's impossible. I remember when many people congratulate me for my talk and give me a standing ovation, but one person said, Dr. Eger, you were okay, but, and I'm thinking, what did I do wrong? See, I have to pay attention, what I pay attention to in my self-dialogue.
Absolutely. And I think that's true for everyone, and it's really challenging. Douglas says he's so sorry for all of your experiences, and he's thinking of going into work in counseling, dealing with grief, trauma, and loss. He's in school for his master's, and he said if you could give him one piece of advice as a counselor, what would it be?
Well, the best thing would be to become a compassionate listener, because sometimes we respond too quickly to something that may have not been said. I think it's good to check it out and just repeat what you heard. And then you know that they know that you're listening to them. You know, there is a joke about two psychiatrists in the elevator, and one of them is all disheveled, and the other one is with a three-piece suit. So the disheveled one said, you know, it's amazing how you listen all day long and you're looking like this. And the guy said, who listens?
Right, right. Another question is from Andrea. She says, you mentioned guilt is in the past. Could you expound on that and share the difference between guilt and shame? I think guilt is what we do. Shame is who we believe we are. But could you talk about how we heal that guilt?
The guilt is in the past, what we could have done or should have done. And there is one thing we can never, ever change, is the past. But whatever happened, you made it. So it's what now? But grief is very important, because grief is everything that we do. When you and I talk to people, we invite them to revisit the places where they've been, to relive the experience, but they're not there, they're here. And you and I create that environment that people can feel any feelings without ever being judged. And we just say, tell me more, because love is time, T-I-M-E, time. And that's what we give. And whatever we hear, we meet people where they are, but we treat them the way they are able to or capable of becoming. And this is something that Viktor Frankl, when Search for Meaning, was the person who gave me the verbal capacity to begin to tell my story. Because when I read that book, I wanted to write 10 more pages for everyone. And so I wrote an article called Viktor Frankl and Me, and someone sent it to him to Vienna, and I got a letter from Viktor Frankl and invited me to come to San Diego, where he was teaching and Search for Meaning. And he became my mentor, my colleague, and I am so, so grateful. But when I was with Philip Zimbardo, he said that people who survived and are famous are all men, that they need a female voice. So my book, The Choice, is truly the female voice of Viktor Frankl.
Well, it certainly is. It certainly is. Someone asks, how does your experience process the healing related to addictions?
Well, we can get addicted to anything. We can get addicted to a thought process. And what is important is to think, because your thinking creates your feelings. See, I think the man has a different hemisphere than women do. That's why men want to understand everything. Men are in their heads, and women want to feel the feelings and going through the feeling of grieving. And you cannot heal what you don't feel. So I think crying is very healthy because what comes out of your body doesn't make you ill. What stays in there does.
And I often talk about how grief is a no judgment zone. And yet, we do judge others and ourselves. And it's so important that we have these conversations because, you are a gift to so many. Not only is your book the gift, but you are a gift because I think many times when we go through horrible things, we go, people don't know how bad this is. And we look at someone like you and go, yeah, she knows how bad things can get. And she has found a way not only to survive, but to actually thrive and be happy and to dare to laugh. And I think that's so important when we deal with trauma and loss to know, people always say, is there life after death for our loved ones? And I say, yes, I believe in that, but there's also life after loss and trauma and death for us to be found.
Now, beautifully said. I like to refer Jean-Paul Sartre, writing No Exit. He was really very nihilistic, that out of nothing comes nothing. But if I would be with him, I would ask, how did you get in there? I think we create our own prison a lot of the times when we say, I'm never going to find a man. And sure enough, you have an idea, and then you provide the variables, and then you can say, I knew it all along. So again, that's why I'm saying, think about your thinking and pay attention what you're paying attention to. And write down what you would like from that other person, and then you become that person. And the probability that you will attract your equal increases. Write down what you would like from a soulmate, someone that you can trust, someone that is empowering you, someone that you feel comfortable with, someone who is providing you unconditional love, and then you become that person.
Well,
whatever you practice, you become better at it.
And I can't believe I have a list of questions for you that we didn't get to. We could do this for days because you have so much wisdom. And I just want to say, you mentioned Viktor Frankl. And when I wrote about meaning, one of the meanings I found is my son, David, when he was in kindergarten, they gave out awards to everyone. And he got the award for being most likely to become a helper. And he did not get that opportunity to be a helper in life. And my hope is through my work, through the book, Finding Meaning, he can now be that helper in death for so many. And that's my meaning. And I just want to say, you have inspired me and millions others in their darkest day. And just on behalf of all of us, thank you.
I want to tell you that your son is like Mr. Higgins, who said, by God, he's got it. See, by God, I don't know how to do it with a British accent, but you got it. You got it. You live, you love, you give people opportunities, because the more choices you have, the less you feel like a victim. And so he's now happy in that spirit world and said, by God, my blood is my father's blood, and the father's blood is the blood of the survivors, because your ancestors didn't give up. And they didn't have it as good as you do. And that's why you and I are here today honoring. I am honoring my mother, who told me in the cattle car that no matter what happens, no one can take away from me what I put in my mind. And so today was the most beautiful, wonderful, brilliant man that I experienced. and you're a true mensch in my book.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all you do for everyone and for me. Please check this out. Please look at the phone number and call Creative Conversations that brought this, and you can get an amazing signed book. The choice is also there. They also have the new paperback of my book, Finding Meaning. But this one, I mean, they're both wonderful, but we're here today for the gift. So I want to honor the gift that Dr. Edie is giving us today. So thank you so much. Creative Conversations, thank you for putting this on. Thank you, Mission Viejo Library. It's a gift to everyone. Thank you.